So the last few days have been pretty crazy as far as Valhalla news goes. I did decide to skip over the new gameplay stuff, as the day before I did 3 videos back to back about the newer stuff, and I didn't want to smother you with news again. But in all, I really liked a lot of what I saw. I still have concerns for the game, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't really into a lot of what we saw. Settlements look fantastic. I got goosebumps watching that video of Turrell exploring that abandoned Hidden Ones bureau that's just packed with lore. Hidden Blade insta-kills are a thing you can switch on, as well the classic blade sound is back. By the day, Valhalla is going even further in the right direction, but what I wanted to talk about today was Excalibur and the Swords of Eden, because this was a huge thing from the deep dive trailer that's naturally been sort of buried by a lot of the other stuff. So without further ado, let's get into what the Swords of Eden actually are, what it means for Valhalla, and as per usual, some theories about Excalibur. So this is what we see. We see Eivor lift Excalibur, and we know it is Excalibur because Magnus calls it that, and then we see him actually behead someone with it. So to clear a few things up, this is definitely a Sword of Eden. That was added to the lore back in AC2 in the Truth, and also you can see ISU markings on the hilt, and the rune that Eivor is in is one of ISU architecture. Also, this has been confusing some people. There are multiple Swords of Eden. This isn't one from Unity. Like the apple, the staves, or the shrouds, there are multiple of them, and the two look very different. And there are 4 different Swords of Eden. You've got Excalibur, the Sword of Damocles, that's the one that Alexios has, the main Sword of Eden from Unity, and also Heresy, right? And lastly, you have Perseus' Sword of Eden, which is mentioned in Odyssey as like a sword that was on display in Sparta, but we never see it properly in a game. You don't really need to know all that, but this channel is my one outlet for an excessive knowledge of AC lore, so there you go. Excalibur itself has existed, as I say, in AC lore long before this. And this image is actually from one of the glyphs in AC2, or it existed before that in history, but it was included in that with some other Swords of Eden. And this is King Arthur pulling it out of the stone, just like in myth. And the interesting thing about King Arthur is that he was a Templar, or a member of the Order of Ancients as of current lore. And this is where a classic cheeky Walshie theory comes in. Right, Hephaestus, the bloke who owns the Mega Forge in Fates of Atlantis, I know it's a bit silly, but basically, he was an ISU who made the Swords of Eden and the Spear of Leonidas, and he mentored Consus, who made them with him. Consus was one of the most capable ISU scientists, like he helped make the swords, as I say, but his most interesting creation was the Shroud, or one of the 2 shrouds. Basically, when he knew that his death was coming, he put his consciousness into the Shroud of Eden. When other people, such as Giovanni Borgia or Joan of Arc, came into contact with the Shroud, he'd communicate with them through it. In the case of Giovanni Borgia, he could communicate with Consus years after being separated from the Shroud, and this was a huge deal. Aeita died because Juno couldn't figure out how to transfer the consciousness of ISU into artificial bodies, and when she discovered Consus did it, she came up with the idea of sages. If Consus, someone who helped make the Swords of Eden, knew how to transfer ISU consciousness into objects, who told him how to do it? Because it was clearly very difficult, as even Juno couldn't do it. So if it wasn't him who taught it to himself, I guess it was his mentor, Hephaestus, whom he made the Swords of Eden with. Long story short, I think Darby's ripped off Excalibur from Sonic and the Black Knight. Yes, I think Excalibur could be housing the consciousness of an ISU. What we know about Excalibur is that Arthur, a Templar or member of the Order, wielded it, but with Consus, we know he was much closer to assassin ideals than Templar ones. Just judging by his conversations with Giovanni, who he convinced to give the apple to the assassins, Consus was obviously an outlier, as most ISU we've seen really don't care for humans, using them as slave labour or wanting to control them, and generally, that's what they want, to control them. So if your typical ISU was housed within Excalibur, their ideals would align much more with Templars, possibly getting Arthur to join them. Now, something Darby said in another interview was that Eivor wouldn't necessarily be all the way Hidden Ones or all the way Order of the Ancients, and so far, I don't really see Eivor as someone who'd be naturally pulled towards the Order. So what if Excalibur was like a devil on Eivor's shoulder and served that purpose? Maybe earlier in the game, making Eivor lean towards their ideals, or maybe that's what makes Sigurd join them. That's just a theory, but one thing I am 99% sure of is that this is underneath Stonehenge. Ever since first seeing Stonehenge, it was fairly predictable it'd be an ISU site, and the ISU maps back that up. And as we can see, Eivor is pulling Excalibur out, at an ISU site. So there's no doubt in my mind that's where this is happening. The other thing worth talking about is that we actually see Eivor use the Sword of Eden. Now, the Swords of Eden are obviously super powerful, and with this game being an RPG, and the sword realistically being a super weapon in universe, I'd hazard a guess that this would be like the Spear of Leonidas in Odyssey, where as you progress through the game, you need to keep leveling it up to keep it at your level. Otherwise, you'd have this super OP weapon for the rest of the game, and I can't imagine you get to a certain like power level as they are in Valhalla, and then because you have like some rusty kitchen knife or dull sword that's a higher power level, that's even more powerful than the sword like that. That seems a bit mental, even for current day AC. In an interview, we've heard weapons aren't going to be like Odyssey, and you're encouraged to sort of stick with one that you like without constantly switching, so I think that would make sense. Anyway, those are just some theories I have about Excalibur, the Sword of Eden. Let me know what you think, if you have any of your own. If you enjoyed, maybe leave a like, and if you didn't, maybe let me know why. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time in another Assassin's Creed video.